Okay. Okay, perfect. I wonder if there's going to be an echo here. Okay. Okay, we should be all set to begin.
Good, okay.
So welcome to, what lesson are we holding? We did chapter 5, we did chapter 6, and we did chapter 1. Now, we explained that there's 6 chapters overall, and you do the 6th one. After the 6th comes the first one. But the thing is, this year, 2 weeks get 1 chapter. Why? Because normally the chapter is read on Shabbat, between Passover and Shavuos, and after Shavuos, the cycle continues. But this year, Shabbat fell out on Shavuos, so you skip a chapter. So we have 2 weeks for chapter 1, and that's why I decided since we did chapter 1 last week, instead of redoing a piece from chapter 1, we're going to jump ahead to chapter 4, because we started the cycle 1 week later than the other JLI groups. So we're going to study an interesting Mishnah from chapter 4, the first Mishnah. And Amy, you'll lead us with reading it in English.
Okay. Ben Zoma would say, who is wise? One who learns from every person. As is stated, from all my teachers I have grown wise, for your testimonials are my meditation. Who is strong? The person who conquers their own inclinations. As stated in Proverbs, better one who is slow to anger than one with might, one who rules their spirit than the conqueror of a city. Who is rich? The person who is satisfied with their lot. As stated in Psalms, if you eat of toil of your hands, fortunate are you and good is to you. Fortunate are you in this world and good is to you in the world to come. I'm just thinking about that for a minute. Okay.
Take your time. Take your time.
I just wanted to let that settle in for a minute. Who is honored? The person who honors their fellow creatures. As is stated, Samuel, for to those who honor me, I accord honor. Those who scorn me will be demeaned. Okay.
So what we're going to do today is, first we're going to dive deep into these 4 teachings of Ben Zoma. What's interesting about these 4 teachings is that they're reverse of the typical common way in which we think about these matters. So for example, typically we think, who is wise, who is smart, who's intelligent, someone who knows a lot of information and a lot of stuff.
Right.
So in a teacher-student relationship, the teacher is wiser than the students because the teacher has more knowledge than the students. Comes Ben Zoma and says, that's not what wisdom means. Wisdom means the one who's open to learning new information and is able to learn from everyone and everything. So in a way, there could be a teacher who's less wise than the students because the teacher thinks he knows everything there is to know and there's nothing more to be learned. And the student is humble and is open to learning new things. So the student is truly the wise one while the teacher is blocked. So that's, so Ben Zoma is doing a reverse education. Take out the natural model in which we assume this guy's wise and that guy's not wise. It's really the one who's open to learning new things. That's who's wise. Let's go to the second statement. And later we'll unpack each statement. But the second statement, typically we think, who is strong? The one who has the ability to impose his will over others, he's strong. Someone who he has no control over anybody else except for himself is weak. Comes Ben Zoma and said, the only way you know someone is strong is if he's able to control himself. That's where strength is judged. People who are able to be disciplined and in control of themselves, that's real strength. imposing your will on others, that has nothing to do with what real strength is about. Who is wealthy? Who's rich? Typically, we think the one who is constantly amassing more and more assets and more property and more things and more stuff. He's the one who's constantly obtaining more. He's the wealthy one. Comes Ben Zoma and says, no, the person who's satisfied with his lot, he is wealthy. You could be a millionaire satisfied with your lot, or you could be a millionaire who's unsatisfied and is constantly hungry for more. If you're constantly hungry for more, then you're poor because you don't have what you need. What's the definition of a poor person is he doesn't have what he needs. And if a rich person always needs more, so then he's really poor. Versus someone who's content with his lot. He says, I have enough, so then he's really rich. And lastly, who is honored? Typically we think, it's someone who's worthy of being honored. We say, and here Ben Zoma tells us, no, it's the person who honors other people. He is an honorable person. Being honorable is not something that you announce and you say, I'm honored, I'm famous, look at me. But it's actually the one who honors others. He is truly a respectable person. So we're going to unpack these 4 teachings. So let's unpack the first teaching. So who is wise? The one who learns from every person. So here's the question. Should we really be learning from everyone? What about someone with bad behavior? You meet someone who's a despicable person. Should you learn from him too?
Yes, you can learn what not to do.
So there's three answers. There's many answers, but we're going to take this on 3 levels. The simple answer is exactly like you said. You can learn what not to do.
Right.
Right? So what that means is in other words, God sent you to encounter this person in order to see what despicable behavior is and to learn to stay away from it.
Right.
There was an interesting study they did a while back where they were trying to figure out how to help convicts do better when they get out of prison.
Okay.
And what they realized, they tried different experiments. And what they realized, when they would tell a person, be good, be better, it didn't really have such a big impact when the person left. He fell back to his old habits. However, when they would do a group circle, at each person would share be honest and share wrong. So what happened is the other people would say, wow, that guy, I would never do such a thing. And then they heard so many examples of bad behavior from other people that they said, I would never do such a thing. And then when they went out of prison, they end up not doing all those bad behaviors because they saw how horrible it was and how hurtful it was to other people that they didn't do it. Right. So in other words, as much as we hear, if God would tell us directly, don't steal, don't kill, don't hurt, don't be jealous, don't be anxious, whatever God would tell us directly, we wouldn't hear it. We'd be deaf to it because we're blinded to our out of self-love. However, when God shows us somebody else doing something wrong, if we take the moment, we could say, oh, this is a lesson for me to be very careful not to fall to this level. So that's on a very basic level. There's a level deeper than this. The level deeper is to take the negative trait and learn how that negative trait could be used for positivity. So for example, in the Talmud, it says that envy is the worst of the worst, right? Being jealous of others. However, the reality is, if you have 2 students in a yeshiva learning Talmud, and one does very well on his test, that sets the bar and pushes the other students in the school to do even better. So in a sense, you could harness envy in a positive way. And the same thing is with every negative trait. You name a negative trait, and I will tell you how you could harness that negative trait into a positive. So for example, arrogance. All right, here's how you can use arrogance in a positive way. You want to do something that's wrong, right? So you could say, and you're tempted to do it, and there's really a lot of inner pressure for you to do it. I really want to do that. But then you can use arrogance, and you can do it in the following way. Can a rabbi like me do something as that? Or can an Amy like me, who's so special, fall so low to do something like that? So here you use the arrogance to help you to do something positive.
Oh, okay.
That's another dimension to this. You're learning from everyone. You're seeing negative traits, but you're harnessing those traits in a positive way. So there was a great Hasidic master named Reb Zusha of Anapola. He was always, so he said he learned 7 things from a thief. Number 1, he learned that here's the 7 things. I'm going to read the list directly from his list. It says, what he does, he keeps to himself. He doesn't announce to the world all the things he's doing. So when you're doing all your mitzvahs, it's okay to keep quiet, be humble, be modest. You don't have to advertise everything on Facebook. Next, he's willing to take risks to attain his goal. It's a positive. Some of us are so afraid of risk, we don't accomplish anything in life. So he learned from the thief to take risks to attain your goal. Number 3, he's meticulously careful with all the particulars of his operation, regardless of whether it's a major component or a small detail. For the thief, even small details matter. And for us, we tend to only care about the big things in life. The big mitzvahs I'll keep, but the small mitzvahs, they're small mitzvahs. But the thief, everything matters. If you don't take into consideration all the details, it has a great impact in achieving your goal. Number 4, the thief invests great effort into what he does. And we also have to put ourselves fully and commit fully to whatever we do. Number 5, he does everything quickly and swiftly. He's not lazy. Number 6, he's always optimistic that things will work out. And we too have to be optimistic that things will work out. And number 7, if the thief fails the first time on his mission, he keeps coming back for another try. So these are 7 things that Zusha of Anapola learned from a thief. Finally, we're going to take a 3rd level in how we can learn something from everybody. So the first level was we could learn what not to do. The second level was we could see the negative trait and harness it for good. And the 3rd level is that ultimately everything is God's creation, and therefore deep down there must be a hidden spark of goodness trapped underneath the facade of evil or ugliness. So here's a story to illustrate this idea. This is a story recorded in the Talmud, and it's really a strange story. So it says there was Rabbi Lezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon. He was I believe this was the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. If we know Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and we know Rabbi Lezer, they were great Torah scholars. And this Rabbi Lezer was coming back from Migdal Gadar, from the house of his teacher, and he was riding leisurely on his donkey on the riverside, and he was feeling happy and elated because of this Torah study that he just accomplished. And he met an exceedingly ugly man. And the exceedingly ugly man said to him, "Peace be upon you, my master." And Rabbi Lezer, instead of returning the response, said, "How ugly this person is. Are all the people of the city as ugly as you? Are all the people of the city where you come from as ugly as you?" And the man replied, "I don't know, but why are you telling me this? Why don't you go tell the craftsman who made me? I didn't make myself ugly. God made me ugly. So go turn your complaint to him." So Rabbi Lezer realized the mistake that he made. He was clearly in the wrong. So he dismounted from his donkey, and he said, "Please forgive me. I accept your words, forgive." So the man replied, "I won't forgive you until you go to the craftsman who made me and say to him, 'How ugly is the vessel which you have made.'" So Rabbi Lezer followed this man back to his village. And in the village, all the people came out to greet the great Rabbi Lezer. "Rabbi, Rabbi." So this ugly man said, who are you calling Rabbi? You know what this guy did to me? He called me ugly. He called me exceedingly ugly. So the people said, nevertheless, forgive him, for he's a man who's greatly learned in Torah. And the man said, okay, for your sake, I forgive him, but only on the condition that he doesn't do so again. So immediately after that, Rabbi Lezer started teaching the following: a person should always be humble as a reed and not be hard as a cedar. That's, so this story is so strange because Rabbi Lezer was a very holy person. And yet for him to call someone ugly, where did that come from? Where does a rabbi say such a thing to a person he meets? The person was kind to him. The person says hello. And what does he say in return? Oh, you're so ugly. Where is the city where you come from also so ugly? So what really, a deeper reading into the story actually says that this person wasn't just ugly in appearance. He was ugly in his behavior. He was an ugly personality. And Rabbi Eliezer was trying to break this arrogance that this ugly person had, that he was ugly in behavior and personality, and he wasn't even aware of his own ugliness. And Rabbi Eliezer was trying to bring to his attention that your behavior is exceedingly ugly. And he actually had an impact on the person. The impact he had was that what was the guy's response? Look at the creator, the craftsman who made me. In other words, in an instant, he was put in his place and he recognized, there is a God above and I'm not the only one in control. However, what this man was saying, I learned the lesson, but it's still a really harsh way of teaching. You shouldn't teach people by telling them off and telling them how ugly they are. You should teach people by showing them the right path. And so that was the back and forth. In other words, Rabbi Lezer didn't disagree with his earlier statement that the person was ugly in behavior. He just asked for forgiveness in the way he responded to this person. So this answers, if you look in the verse that I have highlighted here, right? So what's the connection between the first half of the verse? What does the second half of the verse have to teach us anything? The second half of the verse says, for your testimonials are my meditation. What does this have to do with anything? What does it have to do with the Ben Zoma's lesson? But it's telling us that we constantly have to meditate on how everything that exists in this world is a testimony to God. When you see somebody that's ugly, you're seeing God. Now you have to figure out why this godly spark looks so ugly to you. And so you have to meditate on that and try to find within this darkness some light and some spark of goodness. So that's what he's trying to teach us, that you should learn from everyone. From all my teachers, I have grown wise. Why? Because I have spent time to meditate and recognize that everything that exists in this world is a testament to God. And therefore, when we see ugliness, we have to meditate. How could there be ugliness if the creator of the world is a beautiful designer? And so there must be some hidden beauty within this.
But I'm sorry. What about like a Hitler though? Like, can you really find any beauty in a Hitler type? I know it's a hard question, but I had to ask.
Very hard question.
I'm sorry. I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's an obvious question, right?
It's an obvious question. Yeah, it's a good question.
Maybe he's evil. Is there pure evil?
There is a few examples that the Talmud tells us that something is so evil that, in other words, they weren't necessarily born evil, but they have brought so much evil to others that it's irreparable.
Okay.
And that their hidden spark will remain forever trapped.
Oh, okay.
And that it's irredeemable. But it's rare exceptions. Okay. It's really rare exceptions.
Right. Okay. Like a Hitler,
where the
though.
hidden spark is so irredeemable.
Okay.
Okay. Now, let's go on to the next. Let me give you an example of how you could find the good in everything.
Okay.
You know, so Rabbi Levis Barditchev once saw a wagon driver who, in his haste to set out on a trip, was greasing the wheels of his wagon while in the middle of morning prayers. So he's talking to God and he's greasing his wagon. You know. So how would we classically interpret it? What did we see in this scenario? Did we see good behavior or bad behavior?
With the greasing the wagon.
He's greasy. Imagine you're changing your tires while you're while you're praying.
That's not good.
Okay, so here's how Rabbi Levi Yitzchak interpreted. He lifted his eyes to heaven and declared, "Master of the universe, how wonderful are your people Israel. Even while they're changing their tires, they're praying to you."
Okay.
You see that? So that's what this last point is. You have to pay attention that everything is there. There's a redemptive way of interpreting events. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that Reb Levi Yitzchak wasn't aware of, the bad qualities, and he himself would never do such a thing while he was praying. But you can always find a redeeming thing to learn from everyone.
Okay.
Everyone could be your teacher, and also, no one is. Now, let's take it in reverse. Sometimes we refuse to learn from people because we say that person is way too great for me. How could I learn from someone? I can't relate to him. He's a hero that's way beyond. Right. Everyone in the superhero films know that they have to make the hero relatable. Because if the hero is not relatable, it doesn't appeal to you. So you have to give the hero some family discord, some drama to make the person relatable. Same thing, the animals have to have human features, a human way of expressing. If you're making a film about animals, it has to be relatable. And this mission is teaching you that you cannot, if you want to be truly wise, you have to learn even from the very lofty spiritual people and not cut yourself off and say, oh, I can't relate to those people because they're just way beyond me. You have to force yourself to see the good qualities that other people have, even if they're way greater than you, and try to bring it into your own simple life. Okay. Now let's go on to the next phrase. Who is strong? So normally, we think external challenges are the things that test our strength. But really, our greatest challenges come from within. The most powerful things that we have are our own desires and instincts. And they are what motivate us to achieve and accomplish everything in life. But sometimes we are our own worst enemy, as many of us know very well. So there was a great rabbi, the Rebbe of Tzantz, who lived between in the early 1800s. And he really wanted to have a tzitzis. A pair of tzitzis is males wear under their clothing or on top of their clothing, but it's a four-cornered garment with tzitzis. It's one of the mitzvahs in the Torah. And he wanted that garment to come from the land of Israel. And he didn't live in Israel. So it was exceedingly expensive, and he was poor. The rabbi was poor. But he scrimped and he saved for a long time until he had the required sum to purchase this expensive item. Finally, so he gets the item. Now he has to bring it to the tailor to cut the neck, hole for him to be able to put on the tzitzis. And the tailor was so nervous, so he folded the garment. And normally the way they do it in order to get a very round hole is they cut the garment into four and they just cut off, a corner. And then when you open it, you have a circle in the middle. But he was so nervous, he actually folded it an extra time. And then when he cut and then opened it, he had two circles in the middle. And here, his Rebbe saved so much money in order to get a special garment all the way from Israel. And what did the Rebbe tell him? My dear friend, A tzitzis really needs 2 holes. One hole to insert one's head, and the second hole to teach Chaim not to get upset. In other words, he said, you taught me something greater than the mitzvah of tzitzis is the mitzvah for me not to get upset. So I'm not getting upset. And there are many examples of this. There was once a Jew who saved a lot of money to buy an etrog. An etrog is a citron fruit that we shake on Sukkot. And it could be really expensive, especially if you don't live in a region where it's readily available. And this man saved it the whole year. When he came home with his etrog, his wife was so furious that he wasted so much money on a simple fruit that's going to be useless in 7 days that she bit into it and made the whole thing unkosher. And the husband refrained from getting angry. And his master told him, the fact that you didn't get angry was greater than any mitzvah you could have done with the etrog itself. So that's truly strength. Now we'll move on to who's rich. So we know that the more money you have doesn't bring you satisfaction. If you have $1, you want $2. If you have $2, you want $4. In other words, if I would say, Amy, are you upset that you don't have $1 trillion? Say no. Why would I who has $1 trillion? Nobody has $1 trillion. But once I tell you whatever your amount you have in the bank, I'd say I would double that amount and say, oh, I wish I could have that. That would bring me so much good if I just had that. So some breathing space. Because whatever we have, we see how much better life would be if we just had a little more. Things that are outside of our expectation don't cause us anxiety or envy, but things that are within our grasp. I already have 200, so I can imagine what 400 looks like. Those keep us hungry and essentially poor because we're never satisfied with what we have. We change. It's like the children's book. You change the doormat. It was called Just a Doormat. A guy changed his doormat, and then he's like, "Oh, it's such a nice doormat. I have to change the door. It's such a nice door. I have to change." Before you know it, he goes on changing his entire house, renovating his entire house, and then he makes a welcome home party, a brand new home party, and everyone comes in and ruins the doormat. So he has to get a new doormat, and the cycle repeats. So a person has to be satisfied with what he has, and this is good for him in both worlds, right? It says the text that we read, fortunate are you in this world because you're happy with what you have. You don't have anxiety. And good is it to you in the world to come because you'll never scheme to do something inappropriate to get more money. When we are envious, when we want double, if we have 200 and want 400, we try to look for quick fixes to get those things. And usually those ways are inappropriate ways. We steal or we commit fraud or whatever it is to get those that extra income. And if that's the way we go about it, then we lose the world to come. So we're never happy in this world because we always want more, and we don't get a good share in the world to come. We all are aware of the term rat race, but that was coined in the middle of the 20th century. But look at what the Talmud says. The Talmud says, why are all the inhabitants of the world compared to rodents? As the rodent scurries about in hordes, not knowing for what purpose, so do all the inhabitants of the world scurry and hoard, without knowing for what they are hoarding. This is from the Jerusalem Talmud. So if we think rat race as a new term, it's really, really old. Here's an interesting thing. Alexander of Macedonia, Alexander the Great. The Talmud says about him that he arrived at the gates of Eden. He arrived at the gates of the Garden of Eden. And he said, open up for me. So they said, this is the gate of the Lord, and the righteous shall enter it. So he said, I'm also king. I'm also of some account. Give me something. So they gave him an eyeball. See, this is the account that the Talmud says. He went and weighed all the silver and gold against it, and it was not equal to it. So he said to the sage, he asked the sages, how's this so? How could this eyeball weigh as much as all the gold and silver in the world? They said, because it's the eyeball of a human being, which is never satisfied. So he said, how can you prove that this is so? So they took a little dust and covered the eyeball. It couldn't see. And all of a sudden it became extremely light because the eye sees and the eye wants. So it was a lesson to Alexander. So greed and ambition is part of human nature. And we have to utilize it for the right purpose. In other words, when it comes to materialistic things, we always have to look to the person who has less than us and say, you think we have, look how that guy is managing to get by. He's in a worse situation, so I should be happy with what I have. But when it comes to our spiritual situation, then we have to reverse it. We have to look to the guy above us. We have to say, we could really do more spiritually to attain to the guy that's greater than us. Usually we do the opposite. For our spiritual lot, we say, the joke goes, anyone who's more religious than us is a fanatic. Anyone who's less religious than us is a heretic. Right? We always put a scale. People that are more religious than us are a fanatic. Comes the Alter Rebbe says, no. When it comes to our spiritual things, we have to look up to the people that are spiritually greater than us. When it comes to our material things, we have to look below. Okay, now the last point, because we're running late. So who is honored? The person who honors their fellow creatures. Now notice the expression here is not their fellow human beings. It's their fellow creatures. That means you're honoring someone who the only redeeming factor in this person is that he's a creation of God. You're meeting a person who's not honorable. He doesn't deserve honor and respect. The only reason why he deserves your honor and respect is not because of his kindness, not because of some other qualities he has, but simply because he's a creation of God. He's a fellow creature. That's the only reason you honor him, and that's real honor. Someone who's able to respect everyone because they are a fellow human being. So we have to recognize that this is actually the highest virtue. The fact that the guy has money or has talents, is that why he's deserving of honor? Or is the fact that he's a creation of God? The fact that God created him and said, you are worthy of existing. If God created him, God is telling him that he's worthy of existing, that he needs to exist. So that's someone who's worthy of respect. And Amy, I'll double back. Your question here is a valid question here as well. And probably the answer is along a similar lines as well, about how could we really honor everybody. But for the most part, we could honor people, even people who we vehemently disagree with what they're doing and their beliefs. And I think this is an important lesson to take to heart in a time like today.
Yeah.
To really seriously show respect. We're not saying you have to agree with them. Mm-hmm. Just show respect. We're all creations of God, and we're all here for a purpose. And it doesn't mean we have to compromise on our values to show respect to others. We could stick to our values and say, but even if I disagree with you vehemently, but that's your ideas and your opinions, but not you yourself. You yourself need to exist, and I want you to exist, and you should always exist and be a part of our world.
Except for like a Hitler, right? I mean, and you're saying that's a rare case.
Right. But I'll give you an example. This is a story I brought in the positivity bias class. Alan Dershowitz is a famous lawyer. Yeah. And he was fighting for civil liberties, and there was this senator, Jesse Hamilton.
Oh, you're zooming out.
What am I zooming out? What does that mean? What do you see now?
Okay, better.
Okay.
Okay, Alan Dershowitz.
Alan Dershowitz was upset that Chabad invited a certain senator named Jesse Helms to the dinner, Chabad dinner. Now he wasn't, so he wrote a sharp letter to the Rebbe saying, how dear Chabad, this person stands for things the opposite of what a Jew should stand for, and how dear Chabad. So the Rebbe responded a very gracious letter compared to the tone in which the Rebbe was, Alan wrote to him. Alan is the one that shares the story. So he says, the Rebbe responded to me and said, first of all, he was honored amongst a bunch of other senators. It wasn't as if Chabad chose him amongst all the senators. It was a selection. Second of all, you never know how a person might lead their life if you show them some respect and you guide them in the proper place. And let's see who's right on this matter. And eventually, Jesse Helms became one of the most influential figures on strengthening the ties between America and Israel, and protecting the Jewish people as a whole. So even though in the outset, Alan Dershowitz said this person's not worthy of any respect, and the Rebbe told him, instead of focusing on the areas where he's not worthy of respect, try to focus on the areas where he is worthy of respect, and that you'll see with time this person will turn around.
Wow.
So this is something that Alan shares constantly.
Okay.
And it's very unintuitive. It's very unintuitive. Naturally, we're like, how can you respect such a guy? Such a, but we have to not focus on what divides us. We have to focus on, we're all here for one mission together. Could you imagine if the astronauts that just flew to space, started fighting?
Right.
Millions of dollars were spent on their mission, and they're squandering it on, who gets to go first, who gets to go second. They have to focus. I'm sure they have their differences, the astronauts, but we beg that they'll get along, that they'll focus on the common denominators, and on the mission depends on them, to get along and to cooperate. And so God has this mission for us, and if we don't get along, it's trouble. God invested so much into us, and we have to really harness it by working together with others. Yeah. Okay, so that's it for today.
Well, just one quick question along those lines.
Mhm.
Like, so with politics, and how they're fighting Democrat, Republican, red, blue, it's God is greater than politics, right? Like, if a politician is going to do something to hurt you because you're not doing what he asks you to do, God can solve that problem for you, right? And override the politician.
Absolutely. But we're asking how you should view. In other words, we know that the Rebbe disagreed very strongly with many Israeli politicians.
Okay.
And yet you ask any of the Israeli politicians, they'll tell you the Rebbe was a lover of Israel. Okay. You can say, how could he be a lover of Israel if he disagreed strongly with so many political ideas that are connected to Israeli politicians?
Uh-huh.
And they would tell you that the Rebbe loved the Jewish people, even if he disagreed with the politics behind it.
Okay.
So, in other words, it takes on many layers, but the Rebbe would try to focus. In other words, let's focus on areas where we could make impact together, where we do share common values. Mm-hmm. Second of all, even if we won't make any impact, you're still a brother, so we still have to get along, even if we'll never agree.
Okay.
And not cut each other off and count anyone out.
Right. Okay.
So that goes with politics too. The natural tendency is to say that everyone has the worst intentions and everyone's out to get us. Everyone in the other party is out to get us.
Right.
And really to assume, a more redeeming light. And it doesn't mean just because they have a redeeming light doesn't mean that they're right. to focus on the areas where, try to find unifying factors as much as possible. And even if we never agree, to remember that we're one big family and one big nation. There was a mayor during the 1991 riots in Crown Heights. There was a mayor who came to the Rebbe and said there should be peace between the two people. In the Crown Heights riots, there, between the Chabad and the African American community.
Right.
And the Rebbe said, we're not two people, we're one people.
Okay.
There should be peace in the one people. As long as we recognize that we're one people, then there'll be peace.
Right. True.
That's,
True. Good example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Be well.
You too. Thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I'll see you Thursday, 5:00. I'll share with you the details if you don't have it.
Oh, yeah, I don't have them, so share, yeah.
Okay, I'll share it. I'll send them an email.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.